And
all right, well, it looks like that we are officially live on Facebook. Hope everybody is having a fantastic day.
hold on.
My name is Nicolle Block. I am with Amalgamated Management Company. I'm their vice president for Texas. And I'm joined today by Becca Ramadi. She is the vice president for TAAEF. She will be handling all of the Facebook and chats, any comments that you guys might have. And then she'll definitely pipe in, as I know she's super passionate about what we're going to talk about. So welcome, Becca. And as you've seen in past episodes, we're doing hints from HR. So we're looking to resources in our industry that we feel can, lend value, lend their experience, and just spend some time with everyone here. So today we are extremely lucky to have Amanda Kison with Greystar. She has over 10 years of experience in the recruitment world, but she is their senior, make sure I get it right, the senior talent acquisition advisor for Greystar. So welcome, Amanda. We're really excited that you're here. So welcome.
Yes, hi everyone.
And in getting to know Amanda, we have quickly realized that we're going to become best friends after this. So we have just lots of great conversations, and I hope that you guys get so much out of this, as she is a wealth of knowledge. So we'll go ahead and kick into it right now. So Amanda, I know that with Greystar, you had talked to me about you already used virtual platforms kind of prior to COVID. But if you can kind of talk to us about how you've handled it in the past as far as virtual interviewing, and then how it's changed with COVID, I think that would be really beneficial for everybody.
Yeah, I've always used virtual interviewing, before, pre-COVID. And at the time at Greystar, we used Skype Business. And once, COVID hit, we had to open, the platforms up, right? Because we had to cater, to different candidates and what platforms they can use. And one thing to keep in mind is that there's Teams, there's Zoom, there's, plethora of stuff, right? And I remember when COVID hit, I wasn't familiar with Zoom. And I had a candidate like, hey, can we connect on Zoom? And I want to make sure that I cater to this candidate. They still had a similar experience as an in-person interview.
Right.
I'll admit, I phoned a friend and I was like, hey, can I send you a Zoom link? Because I'm trying to figure out how this works, right? And if it works externally, if I'm sending it from a business email, how it all works. And for about like 15, 30 minutes, I played on the platform. Even did an interview with a friend to see how it worked and how it would work on an external end.
Right. Well, and I think that, oh yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, no, keep going.
No, what I was gonna say, I know with the Zoom is just one. I mean, you mentioned, you use Skype. I've seen people wanting to do FaceTime, Microsoft Teams, Ring Central, and if anyone else wants to drop any other ones in the chat, we would love to. I'm sure there are more than what we've been experiencing. But to your point, you as an operator had to learn that platform. And so imagine as an interviewee, a candidate, if you're multiply that by as many companies as you're interviewing with, you have to learn their processes as well. And so what would you say that experience has taught you as far as how you approach, that candidate now, since it does add a little bit of stress, sometimes. How has that changed your perspective?
You know what? One thing is that I will say is that as with the situation and being an interviewer is just to adapt and adjust to the situation, right? Because there's times like, hey, I might schedule a Teams, a candidate might join the call, but we're having technical difficulties. So trying to adjust and make that candidate feel comfortable, right? Because they're already nervous, right? They're already coming to the interview feeling nervous, but how can we make them feel comfortable? So the next step is like, hey, what do you feel comfortable? What platform do you feel comfortable using? Do you have an iPhone? I can FaceTime you. Let me be the one being the interviewer to adjust to the situation and make you feel comfortable so that we can continue the process.
And that's a really great point. And I think that that's something that, even at my company that I'll take from this call is that, our goal is to make the candidate feel comfortable. And it's really on us as operators to speak those multiple languages. Because again, they're they're all different, experience levels with the technology, and it's constantly changing. So I think that that's something that I think operators should take note of, is that we should learn or ask that candidate what they're comfortable with. If they do have an iPhone, FaceTime is pretty easy for everyone, and it is not difficult to figure out, but it is a different platform. Whereas my company uses Ring Central, and I know our recruiters have had to, walk people through that process and get them set up, and they download an app, and in order to prepare for the interview. I think that's something to take away, is that maybe we can look at the other venues. I have had feedback before too, to where people that want to interview through Microsoft Teams, as far as operators, if someone only has a Gmail account, they're not in that Microsoft Teams. So we're sending them an invite to an interview that they can't participate in. So just like you said, that grace, think about it from the interviewee, the candidate's perspective. Oh my gosh, I'm not able to talk. They can't see me. I'm late and I'm freaking out. I'm starting to sweat, or whatever those things, and we're having to talk them down from the ledge. So I think that's really key. And I appreciate you saying that you learned all the different ones, as opposed to having the candidate have to do that. So I think that's really poignant.
Well, here's a couple extras, a couple other ones that we see in the chat. A couple from Google Meet, and Google Duo, which I've never heard of. So thanks for that one, Cody.
Yeah, no, Google Meet is one. So I worked for Lincoln Property Company, and they use Gmail as their, as their email. And so GChat, so the GChat was something that you would use all the time. And so if you are familiar with Google, as opposed to, like we just said, Microsoft Teams, or didn't have that venue or that capability, that's a great example. Just another one, right? Thanks, Cody. To where we have to be able to, maybe you have a Gmail address that you set up through for you, that you can get on GChat with somebody as a recruiter. That's that's just another way we can adapt, right?
Yeah, one thing I will always say, especially during this time, is that even though it's virtual, to still always treat it as an in-person. Minus the technology for the moment, right? But to always treat it as an interviewer or a hiring manager interviewing candidate, and make sure you're prepared. Come prepared. That's where you test your technology first. Test your lighting, test your microphone 5 minutes before the interview. Have the job description printed out. Have the interview notes printed out. Make sure you're dressed professional, because your expectation is also for the candidate to dress professional, and just have everything set up that once you do the virtual interview, you're already prepared.
Yeah, no, and I think that preparation is key. And I think that sometimes we forget that, I think we get used to, working from home. Sometimes, you have your suit coat on, and, your pajamas on too. I mean, we've all been there. Admit it, I'll admit it. But, I think that thinking about preparation for the interview is key. So yes, being punctual means you're arriving at that technology ready to go. So if you haven't tested the technology, how many times are you scrambling going, oh my gosh, I can't get in. So that definitely adds to it. But the professionalism is something that I think, from my perspective, and you can share any experience that you have, I think people have forgotten about that. I think that's probably the biggest learning curve, because professionalism isn't just what you physically are wearing. It's understanding your environment and how you're projecting yourself on screen. If I'm doing this Facebook Live and I'm looking down like this at my notes the whole time, that I haven't prepared. I have to be able to look at the camera and know, and that's a skill. I had to learn that. I'm not used to talking to people. I'm used to looking at you. If I look at you right now, I'm looking down. So I have to see you in my periphery and stare and look at a camera. So I think that those are things that people are missing, maybe, here and there. And I have some, experiences I can share, but I'd love to kick it over to you of some things you've seen as you've been interviewing that people might have forgotten.
And I wouldn't say seen, but some of the stuff that I've heard, especially from my regionals, is that the distraction, right? The distraction, where when you're conducting an interview, or even if you're the candidate, as similar to any other interview, it's a meeting time, right? So designate that time. Right. I had a call from a regional that called me and was like, Amanda, she was touring her property and talking to her employees while we were interviewing, Oh my God. Hey, so that's not something when you're designating time for interview, designate that time.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're, to your point, when I'm going to interview physically at someone's office, I don't invite them to my property to walk property with me. I'm going to go to their physical office and designate that time. And I think that's very key. Or you'll see distractions, people walking behind. Now, if they're able to ignore it, then hey, that's just everyday meeting on Zoom these days, right? So I mean, we don't judge, I guarantee, but if they turn around, and I've had people turn around and talk to them in the interview, not just saying, hey, give me a minute, but like saying, continuing the conversation, like, oh, is there a third person I should be looking to right now? Wait a minute. So I think that's poignant too. But one of the things that you and I had talked about is having the candidate remember to focus on their camera. So sometimes, you mentioned that job description and their resume, but talk a little bit about how they position it with and maybe some of the things you might see if they don't position it right.
No. Very important. The same thing for a candidate as well, is to come prepared. I usually recommend when I'm speaking to a candidate before they join a virtual call or a meeting, it's that log on 5 minutes, right? Because, we're going to be prepared. We want you to be prepared. Check your technology. Make sure when you're interviewing, because there was an experience where when she logged in, I just saw her neck, or a candidate's neck, right? And I was like, okay, let's move your, camera down so, we can see eye to eye. But keeping that in mind, as well as what you noted, Nicolle, that, we might be professional up, in pajamas on the bottom, but make sure we keep that image of our professional attire. Because I think, was it you that quoted that, we saw someone that, all that wasn't professional all the way, right? And shorts on the bottom.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Amanda. From when we did our back and forth in preparation for this call, I did have an interview with someone who set maybe her laptop on the ground or on a lower space and then sat. And so as she was, we get nervous during interviews, and maybe sometimes you rock back and forth, or when she was rocking, it was changing the camera's view, and I could see she was wearing shorts with her legs crossed, underneath. And so her legs were kicking up, but because she had either her resume or her job description up on the camera as far as her view, she didn't have the camera as her view. So she was unaware that was happening. And so when we were talking about things that you prepare for a little bit differently than you would for an in-person interview, that's one thing, is that you need to always know what the camera is showing so you can make adjustments as necessary. So if you only have one screen and you pull up the resume, the camera is still filming you.
One of my favorite things that I've learned during COVID and being on Zoom so much is to raise up your computer. So I have my laptop on a box so that my eye line is with the camera. So I think that's a really good tip to pass on, is just raise it up so that you're at the same eye level as your computer.
Yeah, and absolutely. Hey, and there's no shame in my game. It makes me look thinner. So, I mean, I'm just going to say it. I mean, if you lift up the camera and angle it back, it takes off at least 10 pounds. So there's your health tip for 2021. If you haven't, we also don't want to be looking up anybody's nose. That happens. Or to Amanda's point, all you saw was a neck. We don't really understand what they're interviewing, what that means, but, but they're just not self-aware. And so those are different ways we have to prepare for a virtual interview as opposed to a traditional one, because you wouldn't have to think, how are they viewing me? Because you're sitting in front of them, so it definitely changes that a little bit.
Yeah. And as an interview, I think it's okay to tell the candidate, just like when, I only saw someone's neck for a while and she didn't notice. I was like, okay, hey, so-and-so, let's move your camera, because, I want to see you eye to eye, so we can have this, great conversation. So it's okay to note it, right? It's okay to tell them.
And at the end of the day, you want them to be comfortable. And I would be mortified if I went through, this entire thing and had some big thing on my cheek and Becca didn't say anything to me or whatever, right? It's just, if you said, hey, Nicolle, something's on your cheek, I can take a look and like, oh, sorry. It's just human nature. And I think it's, it kind of sets up the transparency. We have to be very transparent in our interview process and hope that we convey our energy and our intention just as we would in person.
Yes.
So that's pretty wild though. But as far as preparation, you did mention, still reviewing the job description, going in with the technology, preparing for the interview just as you would, if you're walking in their door. Is there anything else that you would add? And then you mentioned lighting. I think that was another one that's key. There's been a couple of dark interviews that I've seen. I don't know if it's on purpose, so they just don't want to be seen, or.
Yeah. No, lighting is very important. Oh, I love.
Get it, Becca. Oh man, I thought your skin looked very dewy. I thought your skin looks amazing, but hey, I love it.
Checking your microphone, just like prior to this call, I was on my AirPods, and you guys were telling me, it's like, hey, you have an echo, so I switched to my wired one. Or even if it's sometimes better to use the speaker, just checking all those like pieces off, right? I mean, timing it where, right now you might hear my dog running through, but
distractions. Just keep staring straight, Amanda. Keep staring straight.
But being, trying to time it where there's no distractions if possible. Right. I'll be very transparent with me, and there was more learning lessons for me at Greystar. Everyone knows my twins. Okay, I have a set of twin boys, and I had to move my home office several times because of them. And, because I can mute them out, but then people on the call can hear them. So just keeping that in mind, if you're able to prevent that, try to do as much as you can.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you know what's interesting, and we might just open it up as far as the hints from HR. Becca's dog was on, I think, our first one. And so we might just have a dog segment. I can bring my Great Danes in. I think that might be, I think that would be fantastic. But again, it humanizes us. We're talking about grace and grit. And that's what's really gotten us through 2020 and what's going to get us through 2021. But you stay focused. You stay the course. We stay with the conversation. Yeah. That says more about the candidate sometimes, right? I mean, because the circumstances are going to be what they are. So we've talked a little bit about what you've seen prior to, COVID in the pandemic. And then we've talked a little bit about how it's changed. But I want to talk a little bit about disruptors. So in our industry, a disruptor is something that comes in and kind of flips us on our ear sometimes. And many times it comes from outside of our industry. Too many times we're kind of blinded by what we do. We are multifamily, what are our competitors doing? But it's kind of the same Kool-Aid we're all drinking. And I'll give you an example, Amanda. We changed our pricing model about 20 years ago to match and mirror the airlines, more of an on-demand type, pricing with some of the pricing systems that we have out there. That was an example of a disruptor. And I think that, when you and I were talking earlier, I think there are some disruptors, I mean, one of them being COVID-19, but I think there are some disruptors that other industries are using that could potentially kind of weave their way into multifamily with regards to the virtual interviewing and actually almost applying in some ways. So can you talk a little bit about what you've seen and what you think's coming?
Yeah. What I can speak to, last year I was very fortunate at Greystar to participate in this huge project. It was technology, but more on the talent acquisition side. We viewed so many vendors, different platforms. What can we do on the technology piece to help our hiring process, right? And some of the platforms that we saw that correlates with virtual is that there's what we call on-demand videos, right? Where there's pre-screening questions and it's part of the application process and it's a video. So it might be, 1 to 5 questions. The candidate's answering, just like me looking at this camera. It's like, okay, what's your work schedule? Are you available to work on weekends? What type of culture are you looking for? What is your customer service experience? And there, that video is saved where it's uploaded into the ATS, whatever ATS system a company has.
And what is it? What can you just, for everybody that's out here that might not know, what is an ATS system?
Oh, applicant tracking system.
There you go. All right, fantastic.
Yes. So in the ATS system, hiring managers, say community managers, property managers, can view these videos, and already the pre-screening questions are eliminated. So helping streamline that hiring process, and then, requesting for that person to come in-person interview to do more of an in-depth.
I see. So that might even be a time saver for, a recruiter like yourself who prior to would do phone screens. So you would call these candidates, you'd ask those same maybe 4 or 5 intake questions just to see if they're going to move forward. And this is a way that we can put those 4 to 5 intake questions up on, whatever. What now have you found, and I don't know if you know it to this detail, but where does if a candidate goes to, Indeed or something that's again, a kind of a search engine out there, would that be where they would find those questions? Or if they're applying at Greystar, would that be where they would find those questions?
It'll be integrated into the platform on the career side. So for Greystar, it'll be Greystar. But I'll be honest, I was on LinkedIn the other day posting a position on LinkedIn. They have the option. It's like, do you want to do pre-screening of videos? So different platforms already have it. It might even been Indeed, to be honest with you. It could have been either two that I was posting on, but they already give that option. It's like, do you want to do a video pre-screening? What questions do you want? That's great. It's becoming more available. So I think that's something in the future that you're going to see a lot more available, that's helping streamline the process, as well as seeing these videos integrated into the process.
Well, and it also may an unintended benefit may make people more comfortable on video, so that when they get to that virtual interview, that they're more comfortable.
Yeah. Well, one of the things we also discussed is that the technology, isn't slowing down. If anything, it is ramping up exponentially. So to have these candidates be able to problem solve and figure out the different technologies as well as us, whether that be through, like Becca said, that intake question, or figuring out how to interview with us traditionally now, this new tradition, that I think that shows their adaptability, with technology, which speaks to them, as far as a potential as a candidate. But I think that's interesting. One of the things we talked about was, should we or could we, record these interviews? And when you answer those 2 or 3 questions or those intake questions, the candidate is consenting at that point in time. So consent's handled. When we're having an interview like this and we want to record it, then we have to have consent from all people. So is that something that as an industry we need to think about too? Because it might save, if you're like, hey, I have this interview, this candidate, Nicolle Block, here's our interview. Would you like to move forward? So you could send that interview to a hiring manager as well, and saving lots of time on both sides, the candidate and, and the one that's interviewing. So that's really interesting. Your perspective on that. Has Greystar started that yet?
We are looking into that right now. Yes. So, and it is, and I think part of the application is part of the application. When you apply, you consent to all that.
Yeah, but very interesting how something that we wouldn't have considered 6 months ago, definitely not years ago, as far as a video intro or a video screening is something that's really just changed, because again we have that disruptor in COVID-19, and other industries are doing it. I know boards, you mentioned when they're hiring for CEOs or an executive suite, it's a panel interview with board members. So it's a totally different approach. It doesn't mean that it can't work for us. We just have to take a look and see how we can adjust it.
That was actually one of the questions that we had in the chat is, have you done interviews that have multiple interviewers involved? And are you seeing that? And how's that working?
Yeah. We actually, at Greystar, because we like to have a lot of participation in our interviews.
Absolutely.
I'll be very transparent. I was on a panel and I didn't realize, you probably know Mac Armstrong, Ryan Terrell, you hear all, and I'll be very transparent, I didn't realize how high up they were. And I had a panel in-person interview, and I should have been so nervous, but they are so great, so welcoming, right? But Greystar, we love to do panel, right? And even virtually. And it is set up similar like this, where there might be 1 or 2 people on the call and the main person interviewing, but it's just an open, candid conversation going back around that it looks similar like this.
Yep. And I would say at Amalgamated, we've done the same. I do totally echo Amanda's sentiments, but I would also add that, one of the things that we said when we launched this series is that, interviewing is a skill that's done behind closed doors in general. So managers have an aversion to it. They don't know how to do it because they're not shown prior to them sitting in the seat and being responsible, if you will. So I try to use it also as a coaching opportunity. So if I'm interviewing with another regional manager or another community manager, the hiring manager, we'll prepare together on who's asking what questions. And then we get to, so then they can kind of get experience. We're not having all of the responsibility. So I think that's an unintended positive consequence of having these video interviews, is because we can all interview from different areas, and it's a learning opportunity for the hiring manager. So he or she can become more comfortable. So I actually thought that was a positive that came out of it, for sure. But yeah, we're currently doing that. And I think many of us in our industry are.
And Nicolle, if you're a recruiter or talent advisor able to participate, I usually try to lean in, just join, where I'm not leading the conversation, but I'm just there being that, airplane controller, right? Like, okay, what do you need help? Just to make sure everyone, is okay and comfortable,
Absolutely. Well, and comfort is key, right? So I think it definitely depends on the skill level of the people that are interviewing, what position you're interviewing for. I think we make those decisions on who needs to sit in on that. So sometimes, yes, Shelly, she is a fantastic asset for us. And there's times that she will offer her services or say, hey, I think, do you need me or not? Because she can only be in one place at one time, right? But I think that, if you're making those decisions as an operator, then, that's part of your preparation. Who needs to be on this call? Is the candidate, comfortable with a panel? Do they know it's a panel, right? We want to make sure that we're not surprising them, but it's been really beneficial, I think. And I've gotten good feedback too from people that are getting experience interviewing, whereas they might not have had as much before.
So we have a few more minutes left. So I wanted to ask Amanda and Nicolle if there's anything extra they wanted to add before asking a couple more questions.
No, ask away.
Amanda, anything?
Any questions?
Okay, so here's our question.
Okay.
Do you feel like virtual interviewing allows the interviewer to meet more candidates? Has it allowed you to see more people and be more efficient with your time?
Yes, I most definitely, especially for me, because in the stage where I come in, I'm more of the pre-screener, right? So it's helped me sort of, I would say, streamline. I don't want to call it, because I don't think calling it speeding, right? I call it streamlining, because I still want to learn about the individual, but it's helping me streamline the process, trying to identify if this is the right candidate to share that information out to hiring managers.
Yeah, and I would say it's almost the same, because in general, they're coming to me anyway. So, but I think I can probably fit more in if I'm working remotely, so I think probably a little bit more, but it still depends on your schedule. So yeah, so I think maybe 50-50.
And then Shannon agrees that we should bring in the pups.
Shannon, Shannon, I'm not surprised that Shannon, Roscoe is her dog. Like I know Shannon. She wants Roscoe.
You should have a dog segment.
Yeah. Well, and so
we'll work on that.
Yeah, we'll have a dog segment. It'll be, it's going to be huge. It's going to be bigger than hints from HR. It's going to be, hints from H Bark. We'll call it H Bark. But I think that, again, thank you, Amanda, for your time. I'm glad to have met you through this process and look to you as a resource in the future. I'm glad that
same to you.
We've been able to meet. Before we conclude, I did want to remind everyone that Be the Next Ambassador has launched, and hopefully you guys have seen that through your local outlets on social media. Hopefully you're following the Texas Department Association Education Foundation on all platforms, whether that be LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. I mean, we tweet, we do it all. But I want to make sure that you guys are looking for maintenance superstars. So this one is the maintenance edition. So to be the next ambassador for the Room to Grow campaign has been something that we have seen people just flourish and grow. They've become ambassadors. Their potential is limitless. So I want to remind you to submit, to look to your future leaders on your maintenance teams and recognize them so they can be the next Room to Grow ambassador. The link to the application submission is also going to be dropped in the chat. If you have any questions on that, you can reach out to us on our website. Again, on any of our social media platforms. Becca, myself, Amanda, we're definitely here for it. We want to recognize those maintenance teams. So again, my name is Nicolle Block, and I am thankful to be the host today and to meet the fabulous Amanda and spend any time I can with Becca. But that concludes our Hints from HR, and we will definitely see you next week. And until then, be safe.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.